Good morning. Welcome to our worship service of Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. All the links to today's service, including the order of service, are available on our website and in this morning's worship service email. Whoever you are and wherever you come from, for this hour we here are one gathered congregation and all are welcome. My name is Robin Singh, and I've been a member of KUUF for about 2.5 years, and I've been involved with the worship committee and the Fun and Frolic committee and have led a meditation group. This morning's service is a little different and will feature a dialogue entitled The Fullness of Being, a conversation between Margaret Fuller and Ralph Waldo Emerson. It was written by UU minister Kate Lore and was initially performed with Reverend Bruce Bode at Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Port Townsend. This morning, the conversation will be presented by KUUF member Jessica Demick and her friend Brian Shourd. If this is your first time with us, welcome. We would love to see everyone attend our Zoom coffee hour after the service. The Zoom link is in the email that went out this morning and will show on your screen following the service. You will need to use the password coffee, spelled with a capital C, to be admitted. KUUF announcements are available on our website, kuuf.org, or in our weekly email newsletter, The Candle. And now we acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish people. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, and basket weavers, the Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's central Salish Sea as they have for thousands of years. Here, the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Now, please enjoy our call to worship, hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us, performed by Alina Hemingway and Brian Kenny. Join me now in our chalice lighting. If you have your own chalice or candle at home, please light as I read our chalice lighting words. We light the chalice this morning with words from The Oversoul by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love. Our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit, was written by Jim Scott, an American composer, guitarist, and singer who has visited over 700 Unitarian Universalist fellowships. Jim is also co-creator of The Green Sanctuary, a program for churches to become more sustainable. Please join in singing our opening hymn, number 347, Gather the Spirit, performed by Alina Hemingway and Mike Menifee. Please join me in our spoken affirmation. The words will appear on your screen. We gather as a caring community, seeking life's deeper meanings. We value diversity and affirm the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. Now it is time for our morning offering. You may donate electronically or by check. If you would like to donate electronically, please use the PayPal link in this morning's email or on our website. Please email admin@kuuf.org to let us know if your donation is for 1, the KUUF General Fund, 2, the Minister's Discretionary Fund to help our members in need, or 3, our monthly charitable giving recipient for the month of December, Planned Parenthood. Funds that are not given a designation will go to our general fund. If you would like to donate by check, please send a check to the address on the screen. In the memo line, you can designate to which of the funds your offering should go. If this is your first time at KUUF, you are our guest and there is no need to contribute. Let there be an offering to strengthen and sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us. Please enjoy our pianist's gift of music, followed by the children's story.
Today's story is called Duck and Goose, and it's written and illustrated by Tad Hills. Oh my, what is that? Duck quacked. That's a silly question, Goose honked. It's a big egg, of course. Of course it is an egg. I know that, huffed Duck. What I mean is, where did it come from? Goose looked skyward. He looked to the river. He looked to the fields. He thought very hard. Who are you? He finally asked. I, said Duck, puffing out his feathered chest, am the one whose egg this is. I saw it first. Goose quickly raised one webbed foot. It's mine. I touched it first. Hey, you should never put your dirty foot on an egg, Duck scolded. Don't you know anything about caring for eggs? Yes, I do, Goose cried out. Stop yelling, Duck yelled, then whispered forcefully, don't you know that you and your screaming are very likely disturbing the baby bird who's trying to take a snooze inside this egg? Goose wished that Duck wasn't right. He lowered his head and whispered softly, I'm very sorry. Go back to sleep in there. My, that's quite a beauty you have, called the bluebird from across the river. Thank you, it's mine, quacked Duck. Actually, it's mine, honked Goose. Thank you. So, asked Duck, what do we do now? We should do something, suggested Goose. Yes, you are right. Good thinking, agreed Duck. Like what? Duck and Goose each thought. Yeah? Well, we must keep the egg warm and the fuzzy little occupant is ready to come out, said Goose. Excellent idea, exclaimed Duck. He pushed past Goose. Step aside and I shall do just that. But Goose was quick too. After a flurry of fussing, grunting and groaning, slipping and sliding, honking and quacking, Duck and Goose found themselves back to back. Scoot over, I don't have any room, complained Duck. You are much closer to me than I am to you. Stop yelling in my ear, Goose. Shh, Goose hushed, pointing at the round thing beneath them. Yes, 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 we must remember. Quiet, quiet, quiet. We mustn't disturb the little one. And so they sat very still and very quiet, waiting. For a long time they waited. They listened to the crickets chirp and the frogs burp. I am going to teach this baby bird to quack like a duck, Duck boasted. Well, I'm going to teach it to honk like a goose, Goose honked back. I'm going to teach this baby bird to waddle, Goose added. So am I, Duck said. They heard the pitter-patter of the rain. I'm going to teach this baby bird to swim, Duck said. Me too, Goose said. To pass the time, they sniffed wildflowers in the warm sun and shared breadcrumbs while Goose taught Duck to honk. They watched the sun set in the sky, and Duck taught Goose to quack. They counted the stars in the night sky. Let's teach our baby to fly, said Goose. Good idea, said Duck. I'm sure our baby will be a fast learner, said Duck. If it takes after you and me, I'm sure you're right, agreed Goose. Together they waited until... Did you feel that, Duck? Duck nodded. Yes, did you feel that, Goose? Goose nodded. It's time, Goose, it's time, Duck squawked. Quickly, Duck slid down and started running in circles around their egg. What should we do now? He hollered. I think we should remain calm, Goose yelled back. Excuse me, a little voice called out. Duck stopped. In all the exciting confusion, he had failed to notice the bluebird kicking their egg. Can I play too? She asked. Play? This is no time for play, yelled Duck. This is no time for games, yelled Goose. And what's with the kicking? I was only trying to get your attention, said the little bluebird. Well, you got it, Duck huffed. False alarm, Goose. Back to work. Can't you see we're very busy here? Goose explained to the bluebird. Yeah, this is serious business. This is perhaps the most important moment of our lives. Oh my, I'm sorry, apologized the bluebird. I had no idea. I just thought that maybe I could play with your ball. It really is a nice one, she added. And then she flew away. Goose gulped. Did she say ball? He whispered to Duck. You know, I did have my doubts, Duck finally said. It's a bit squishier than most eggs I've seen. Yes, and I must say, I was somewhat suspicious of those big dots, Goose admitted. It may not be an egg, but it is lovely, said Duck. Ooh, absolutely, Duck disagreed. It's a keeper. As the crickets chirped, the frogs burped, the grass swayed in the gentle breeze, Goose quacked and Duck honked, and the ball bounced, rolled, and sometimes even flew. The end, Ruby. It's all yours.
So, shall we sing?
Yes.
With the ukulele? I hope you can hear this. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I'm doing okay. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All around the world, all around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. All around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ooh, lost it there at the end of that one. Let's try this. This little light of mine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hooray. Thank you for singing.
Now it is time for our joys and sorrows. Though we are physically distanced from one another, our hearts and spirits remain connected. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows lessened. Henry Woods shares a joy that he was able to help his family pick out and decorate their Christmas tree this week. Brian Kenny is joyful that the storm has lifted and we can be at KUF this morning. And our thoughts go out this morning to the families in Kentucky. And we light one last candle for those joys and sorrows still too tender to share. Please join me in a moment of prayer or intention. In the spirit of community in which we find strength and common purpose, we share our joys, our sorrows, our hopes, and our dreams. We have turned our hearts and minds toward one another, seeking comfort, celebrating together. We are part of the web of life that makes us one with all humanity and one with all the universe. In all the moments of our lives, we are truly grateful for the love and support of this beloved community. May the spirit of life and love bring us peace. Amen and blessed be. Please join in singing hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. The words will appear on your screen.
Good morning to all of you. My name is Ralph Waldo Emerson.
And my name is Margaret Fuller. We're happy to be visiting with you from the 19th century. It's not something we do very often.
Margaret and I realize that most of you have heard of me, although I've been told that not all of you know that I was a Unitarian minister before I became so famous. I didn't last long in that profession because I refused to give communion to my congregants. I know some of you here understand my squeamishness about that ritual. That aside, most people know me as a philosopher, essayist, and poet. I am also an acknowledged leader of the Transcendentalist movement.
On the other hand, most of you have not heard of me. Like my esteemed friend, Ralph Waldo Emerson, I too was a philosopher, essayist, and leader in the Transcendentalist movement. But because I was born a woman in the mid-19th century, my thoughts and writings were never taken as seriously as that of Ralph's, at least not by most folks.
Yes, that's true, Margaret. And I must confess that there were times when I, too, was guilty of not taking you as seriously as my male companions. You helped me, though, in seeing the error of my ways.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Ralph, and for stepping outside of convention. You wanted to do right and to be open to new perspectives. That's what drew us together, was it not? Self-improvement and new ideas. Which brings us to Transcendentalism. For those of you unfamiliar with Transcendentalism, let me briefly say that it was a literary and philosophical movement that flourished in New England in the mid-1800s. Like you here today, we Transcendentalists did not read the Bible literally, which was heresy in our day. We argued against supernatural religion and the belief in miracles. And for us, Jesus was a teacher and a prophet, but not a God. Thus, we refuted the Trinity and the divinity of Christ.
We also affirmed that there were universal religious experiences, truths, insights, and values that transcend any one religion, savior, or prophet. Instead of being guided by tradition and authority, we Transcendentalists open ourselves to the insights of personal experience and nature.
We also placed an emphasis on right action, what you folks here call social justice. Thus, we were leaders in the abolitionist, the feminist, and the anti-war movements. The war of our day was the Mexican War. In fact, we Transcendentalists were active in every social reform crusade in the country. So, although we lived long ago, Ralph and I were more like you folks than you may realize, which is why we're paying you a visit this morning. Not only do we share the same Unitarian roots, we, like you, like to discuss our deepest passions about life's meaning. We're all free thinkers here, and we care deeply about human rights. We also share a love of nature. Like many of you, Ralph and I often gain as much wisdom from being out of doors as we do in Sunday services.
Yes, Margaret and I are delighted to have this time with you, our Transcendentalist heirs. I am pleased to see that the Unitarianism of our day has continued to flourish and be so vibrant, almost 2 centuries after we lived. Margaret, since some folks hadn't heard of you before today, and since you held such distinctive place in the cultural life of the 1840s American Renaissance, can you tell folks a little about your early life?
Sure, Ralph. I was born in 1810 to Unitarian parents. I was raised in Cambridgeport, Massachusetts, the eldest of 9 children. My father, Timothy Fuller Jr., was a lawyer and politician who served 4 terms in Congress. It was always clear to me that father was disappointed I wasn't a boy, but he needed to educate me as if I were one anyway. He was a driven man and a demanding and severe teacher, but his efforts, coupled with my own intellectual precociousness, paid off. I learned to read when I was only 3 years old. By the age of 7, I had already mastered Latin grammar and was memorizing daily passages from Virgil. By the time I was in my 20s, I was so smart and well-read that people found me strange. I had to give up on any hope of leading a normal woman's life, either with regards to marriage or society life. Men were intimidated by me so much that I spent most of my time alone. Still, I refused to be mediocre or obscure or constrained by my gender. I put pen to paper every day, unless I was sick, and spent my days either writing about or teaching art, literature, music, religion, and politics. This hunger for knowledge would serve me well my entire life.
I remember inviting you to Concord. I had gathered around me a circle of poets, reformers, artists, and thinkers. Among them, Henry David Thoreau, Nathaniel Hawthorne, the Peabody sisters, the Alcott family, the Ripleys, and the Channings. When you came to Concord, I introduced you to all of them, and I remember you then said, "I now know all of the people worth knowing in America, and I find no intellect comparable to my own."
Yes, my lack of humility has been noted by many historians. I do remember telling you in a letter that I myself am more divine than any I see. Let us write that off to you, shall we? In any case, I thoroughly enjoyed the deep friendships I made in the Transcendentalist Club. It was so refreshing to be in conversations with people who did not assume my inferiority because I was a woman. I loved being able to speak candidly about philosophical, religious, and political ideas, and also having people with good minds and souls challenge me. I am so grateful to you, Ralph, that you brought me into your circle of intellectuals. And I loved you joining in editing the Transcendentalist journal, The Dial. Luckily, I was eventually able to rise above my sense of superiority over others. In fact, I can still recall the day when I stopped myself on the stairs and asked, "How came I here? How is it that I became to be this Margaret Fuller? What does it mean? What shall I do about it?" It was a mystical moment for me in which I suddenly became aware of all the other times that I had been stopped still by these same questions, how I had been wrestling with these questions of time and purpose and human nature all my life. And suddenly, I wanted nothing more than to leave this noisy, questing self behind. And then the insight dawned on me. There is no self. Selfishness is folly and delusional. All I needed to do is live in the all, and all was me and mine. In that moment, I suddenly and dramatically understood my communion with the soul of all things, and was utterly grateful to at last find my place in the great harmony of things.
Yes, Margaret, this mystical moment you just described, this condition of self-transcendence, points to the very heart and soul of transcendentalism. For this insight you gleaned was not something that you learned from a book or a preacher. It was a direct experience which you immediately understood to be holy. In fact, what you've just described is the soul of the whole that these fine folks referenced in their responsive reading this morning. I'm so glad you thought to mention this experience now. I think it'll help folks grasp the spiritual depth of transcendentalism.
That's right, Ralph. You and I and all our transcendentalist friends encouraged each other to experience religious sentiment directly. Such experiences could happen anywhere, of course, but there was no easier place in which to do this than in the presence of nature, something of which you wrote extensively.
Yes, because it is through the experience of the natural world, both sensuous experience and the study of natural forms and processes, that we find the deepest confirmation of our vast interconnected unity.
Right. Our universe is unbroken, interconnected whole, in which each part is linked to every other part and is actually contained or embodied in every other part. And what I find so extraordinary is that we all have access to this wise silence because we are part of the wise silence.
You are reminding me of why we became friends, Margaret. I love your passion for transcendentalism. When I look back at my time as a Unitarian, I realized that I was often frustrated by the lack of passion within our Unitarian movement. Unitarians can get so stuck in their heads, don't you think? And that limits their understanding of the divine. You, however, managed to break free of pure rationality and were unafraid of passion. Do you remember how we struggled with our own passions for each other? You want to connect with me so deeply from the full depth of your being, but I held back. To be honest, that type of intimacy you were seeking frightened me. I couldn't summon the courage to live life from your depths. After all, I was comfortable with my pastoral life in Concord. But you, Margaret, wanted to live life to its fullest. In the end, I rebuffed your advances, claiming that it would be wrong to betray my marriage vows. Later, though, I would confess that I feared I would never be able to match your activity, audacity, and integrity in life. But enough about our romantic thoughts for one another. Let's get back to our religious convictions. If you were to sum it up, Margaret, how did Unitarianism influence you?
Well, because I was raised as a Unitarian, I knew from a very early age that my main purpose in life was to learn, grow, and make the world a better place. As a woman, however, I felt that my intellectual growth was thwarted by society. My Unitarian upbringing, however, empowered me to organize many intellectual conversations with my women friends and acquaintances. My intent was to promote women's self-esteem by affirming that women had a right to think for themselves and to be responsible for their own lives.
I remember you also accused men of treating women as slaves. You urged that women be given more choices in their lives.
Yes, I said that if you asked me what offices women may fill, I replied, any. And to prove my point, I became the first woman journalist at Horace Greeley's newspaper, the New York Daily Tribune, and then one of America's first foreign correspondents, male or female. And while traveling throughout Europe, I was able to converse with the most cutting-edge intellectual leaders of the day, and then write political commentaries. I loved it. I also wrote my book, Woman in the 19th Century, which became a landmark in the history of women's rights. Now the time has come, I remember writing, when a clearer vision and better action are possible, when man and woman may regard one another as brother and sister, the pillars of one porch, the priest of one worship.
It's sad to note, isn't it, Margaret, that folks today are still grappling with the dualism of male versus female? That's not to imply that your vision hasn't materialized. Humanity has indeed made progress, but we still have a long way to go. I wish you could have lived longer, Margaret. The world still needed your courage and your insights when your glorious life was cut short. Your death devastated me, and I grieved for a long time.
I wish I had lived longer too. In many ways, my life had just begun to bloom. I had been sent to Italy on an assignment to cover their revolution. And there I ended up falling in love with one of its leaders, Giovanni Angelo Asoli, and gave birth to our child in 1848 out of wedlock. 2 years later, our little family was returning to the United States when our ship ran aground on a sandbar off Fire Island. We had almost made it. We were within 150 yards of the shore. The ship broke to pieces and we all drowned.
Your death was a shocking catastrophe for all of us. Our transcendentalist friend, Henry David Thoreau, paced the shores frantically over looking for you. Neither he nor I could believe that you were gone, just like that. I still remember my tribute to you. She wore this circle of friends as a necklace of diamonds about her neck. She was an active, inspiring companion and correspondent, and all the art, the thought, the nobleness in New England seemed at that moment related to her and she to it. Your life ended too quickly, Margaret, but your influence continues to this day. Yes, Sarah Margaret Fuller, you were one of the most prominent literary women of the 19th century and are considered by many as the first feminist. Thank you, Margaret, for living such a daring and authentic life, and for sharing some of that life with us this morning.
And thank you, Ralph, for inviting me into your intellectual sphere and into your heart. Together, you and I helped bring some passion into the otherwise cerebral life of Unitarianism. For even though we clearly valued intellectualism, we didn't stop there. We got people to get out of their heads and into nature to experience the transcendent holiness that surrounds us always. I'd like to think we made a difference.
Yes, Margaret, I think we did. And it is my sincere hope that the story of our friendship will inspire folks here in the 21st century to wrestle with their own ideas about the purpose of life. For we all have to reconcile and balance one's need for a rich inner life and one's responsibility to fight for freedom, human rights, and social justice.
Yes, this is my hope too. And before we go, I'd like to offer up some words for which I am known. Perhaps you can consider them as we enter the silence that will follow. All around us lies what we neither understand nor use. Our capacities, our instincts for this, our present sphere, are but half developed. So let us be wise and not impede the soul. Let us have one creative energy, one incessant revelation. Let it take what form it will, and let us not bind it by the past to man versus woman, black versus white, for we are truly one.
Please join in singing our closing hymn, number 318, We Would Be One. Our closing words come from Eric Williams. The world is too beautiful to be praised by only one voice. May you have the courage to sing your part. The world is too broken to be healed by only one set of hands. May you have the courage to use your gifts. May you go in peace and practice love. We invite all of you to greet each other during our coffee hour. The Zoom link to join is in this morning's email. Remember, the password is coffee, spelled with a capital C. Thank you for joining us this morning, and have a blessed week.